The moment those red and blue lights flash in your rearview mirror, everything changes. Your grip tightens on the steering wheel. Your mind starts racing. Did I speed? Was that turn illegal? Is something wrong with my car? You glance in the mirror again, hoping, just maybe, they'll pass you. But they don't. The siren gives a short burst. It's you. And right there, before the officer even steps out of their vehicle, something important has already started. A silent evaluation. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been pulled over and felt like the situation escalated even though you were trying to stay calm? Drop your experience in the comments, because what most people don't realize is that what happens in those first 30 to 60 seconds can shape everything that follows. And later on, I'm going to explain one mistake officers sometimes make in that window that can turn into a massive legal problem for them. Now picture this. You pull over, engine off, hands on the wheel. You're doing everything right, at least according to what you've heard. The officer walks up slowly, watching your hands, watching your eyes, scanning the inside of your car without making it obvious. Do you know why I pulled you over? That question right there, it's not casual, it's strategic. Most drivers think it's harmless. Some even think it's polite to guess. Maybe I was going a little fast? That's where things start to shift, and most people don't even realize it. From the officer's perspective, that question is doing several things at once. It's testing your awareness. It's testing your honesty. And more importantly, it's testing how easily you'll talk. Because here's the reality. The more you talk, the more information they get, not just from your words, but from how you say them. Your tone, your hesitation, your eye contact, your breathing, all of it gets analyzed. Officers are trained to look for inconsistencies, signs of nervousness, over-explaining, under-explaining. And here's the part most people misunderstand. Being nervous doesn't make you guilty, but it can make you look interesting. And once you look interesting, the stop can expand. Now let's slow this down and look at a situation where things go sideways, not because the driver was doing something outrageous, but because of a chain reaction that neither side fully controlled. Imagine the officer asks again, this time a little sharper. I asked you, do you know why I pulled you over? There's a pause. Maybe you hesitate. Maybe you say, no, officer. That's fine. Legally, that's fine. But now the officer's tone changes slightly. Not aggressive, not yet, but more probing. Where are you coming from tonight? Now we're stepping into a different territory. This isn't about the traffic violation anymore. This is about building a narrative. A lot of drivers don't recognize that shift. They treat every question like it's required, so they answer. I'm coming from a friend's house. Which friend? Just a friend. Now there's hesitation. Now there's vagueness. And now the officer is thinking, why the hesitation? You see how subtle this is? It's not about whether you did anything wrong. It's about how the situation is being interpreted in real time. And here's where officers sometimes start making mistakes, serious ones. Let's say the officer takes your license and registration. That's standard, completely lawful. They walk back to their patrol car. They run your information. But instead of returning promptly, 5 minutes turns into 10. 10 turns into 15. At some point, the reason for the stop, let's say a minor traffic violation, has already been addressed or could have been addressed. So why are you still sitting there? This is where timing becomes critical. Under U.S. law, a traffic stop must be reasonably related in duration to the purpose of the stop. That's not just a guideline. That's rooted in constitutional principles under the Fourth Amendment. If an officer prolongs a stop without a valid reason, without reasonable suspicion of additional criminal activity, they're stepping into dangerous legal territory. And yes, this is where lawsuits are born. But here's the twist most people don't see coming. The officer might not even realize they're crossing that line, because from their perspective, they're just checking a few more things. Maybe they're waiting for backup. Maybe they're thinking about asking for consent to search. Maybe they're trying to build probable cause from small observations, an air freshener, a nervous glance, inconsistent answers. But legally, that extra time has to be justified. Now imagine this scenario continues. The officer comes back. Step out of the vehicle. That command is actually lawful in most situations. Courts have allowed officers to ask drivers to step out for officer safety. But again, context matters. If the stop has already been extended beyond its original purpose without justification, even lawful commands can become part of an unlawful sequence. This is where things get messy. You step out. You're standing by the side of the road. Cars are passing. Your heart rate is up. Do you have anything illegal in the vehicle? That question, again, sounds simple, but it's a pivot point. Because now, the officer is clearly fishing for something beyond the traffic violation. If you say no, they might ask, "Mind if I take a look?" This is where many drivers unknowingly give up their strongest protection, their right to refuse consent. And I get it. It's uncomfortable to say no. There's pressure. There's authority. There's that subtle fear that saying no will make things worse. But legally speaking, refusing consent cannot be used as evidence of guilt. Still, the situation doesn't always feel that clean in real life. And here's where things can spiral into a massive problem for the officer. Let's say you calmly say, "I don't consent to any searches." Now the officer has a decision to make. If they proceed anyway without probable cause, that's a constitutional violation. If they detain you longer just to figure something out, that can be another violation. And if they escalate the situation, raise their voice, apply pressure, make threats, that behavior can become part of a civil rights lawsuit. Now imagine all of this is being recorded. Dash cam, body cam, maybe even your own phone. That footage becomes evidence. And in court, every second gets dissected. Why did the officer extend the stop? What specific facts justified further detention? Was there reasonable suspicion or just a hunch? Because a hunch isn't enough. It never has been. And this is exactly where some officers mess up big time. They rely on intuition instead of articulable facts. They think, something feels off, but they can't clearly explain what or why. And courts don't accept "it felt off" as a legal standard. Now let's talk about another layer that often gets overlooked: the passenger. Passengers are in a strange position during traffic stops. They're not the ones driving, but they're still part of the scene. Officers may ask passengers questions. "What's your name? Where are you headed?" Here's the thing. Passengers generally have the right not to answer. But again, in the moment, most people don't assert that right. They answer casually, sometimes contradicting the driver without realizing it. Driver says they're coming from work. Passenger says they just left a party. Now the officer's suspicion increases, not because of a crime, but because of inconsistency. And once suspicion increases, the officer feels more justified, whether legally accurate or not, in extending the stop. You see how small details snowball? Now let's get to something that really triggers lawsuits: document retention. An officer takes your license and registration. That's fine. But if they hold on to those documents while continuing to question you about unrelated matters, that can be a problem. Because as long as they have your documents, you're not free to leave. And if you're not free to leave, the stop is still active. So if the original purpose of the stop is complete, but the officer is still holding your documents while asking unrelated questions, that's potentially unlawful detention. That's the kind of detail attorneys love. That's the kind of detail that turns a routine stop into a courtroom battle. And here's where drivers often unknowingly make things worse. They try to talk their way out of it. They over-explain. They fill silence with words. But silence, used correctly, is powerful. Not rude, not aggressive, just controlled. Because every extra sentence is another opportunity for misinterpretation. Now let's flip the perspective for a moment. Officers are dealing with uncertainty. Every stop has potential risk. They don't know who they're approaching. They don't know what's inside the vehicle. So they're trained to control the situation. That means asking questions. That means watching behavior. That means maintaining authority. But control has limits, legal limits. And when those limits are crossed, especially repeatedly or blatantly, that's when things explode into something much bigger than a traffic ticket. We're talking about civil rights violations. We're talking about internal investigations. We're talking about lawsuits that cost departments serious money. And sometimes, all of it starts with something small: A delay that went too long, a question that went too far, a search that wasn't justified, or a driver who didn't realize they had options. Now here's something that might surprise you. Not every unlawful stop leads to a lawsuit. Why? Because most people don't know their rights were violated, or they feel intimidated, or they think, it's not worth the hassle. But when someone does push back, when they document everything, when they consult an attorney, when they challenge the stop, that's when the system gets tested, and that's when mistakes become very expensive. Let's go back to that moment, the lights in your mirror. Everything that follows isn't just about the law, it's about human behavior, your behavior, the officer's behavior, timing, tone, choices. One small misstep on either side can change the entire outcome. So next time you see those lights, ask yourself, am I reacting or am I thinking? Because in that moment, thinking clearly might be the difference between a routine stop and something much bigger than anyone expected.